I refuse to shut up. I refuse to shut up.
Yeah,
Yes,
that'll do
it's,
it.
it's really important to keep. I believe speaking truth to power is really, really important, and I believe this is our mission as educators. We are supposed to be teaching the truth. We are supposed to challenge dominant discourses and so on. Secondly, and I think this is really important, is that this San Francisco State historically has been known for the strike. So the university administration would like to retain the image of the strike, to put the flag, to raise money, to do all of this stuff, but as long as it is window dressing. And many of the strikers, many of the leading strikers, like the late Terry Collin, the late Margaret Leahy, the late Damira Ahmed, all of the strikers who led the strike in 1968 came to embrace us, and they kept saying that AMED is the program that realizes our vision.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rania Khalek, and this is Dispatches. To be on the front lines of the battle of ideas is no easy task when you're on the side of the oppressed against a tsunami of propaganda and lawfare. Nowhere is this more true than inside the struggle for justice in Palestine, where academia has long been a battleground for Israel supporters. For decades, anti-Palestinian fanatics have used their superior resources to harass and attack professors and students who dare to speak out against Israeli apartheid, going after their reputations and livelihoods through media smears and legal assaults. This is meant to make an example, to scare others away from speaking out, to discipline activists, and to shut down even the smallest attempts to hold Israel accountable. Those who lead the effort for Palestine, driven by compassion, bravery, and justice, do so at great personal risk and rarely place themselves at the center of the story. So why is it so important that we document and understand such attacks on academic freedom? How does it fit into the context of Zionism and imperialism? What's the role of imperial feminism and Islamophobia in hegemonic narratives? And how does it relate to what's happening on the ground in Palestine, from Gaza to Jenin? Joining me to discuss this and more is distinguished Professor Rabab Abdulhadi, the founding director and senior scholar of the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at San Francisco State University, and head of the oral history project Teaching Palestine. She's been at the forefront of Middle East studies as a teacher, mentor, academic, and activist, pioneering a revolutionary approach despite the relentless attacks on her and those she works with. She's not only persevered, but she's actually won, while significantly contributing to the most important areas of Middle East study, crafting concepts about imperial feminism, while challenging the dominance of professional so-called experts in the global north on colonialism, which should be understood through lived experiences of indigenous people who are resisting it, and all while facing nonstop legal assault, threats, and censorship. But before we jump into it with Rabab, this is just the first half of this episode. The second half is available for Breakthrough News members only. You can become a member at patreon.com/breakthrough news. And as always, be sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell so you get a notification whenever we post new content. And if you appreciate this show, you can also donate below on YouTube. Rabab, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you so much, Rania. It's really a pleasure to be on the show and to be in conversation with you as well.
Well, that coming from you, that is like the biggest compliment I could possibly get. And there's so much to talk about, but I guess a good place to start is you just got back from this incredibly busy tour in England. I don't know where you find the energy, but it's incredible. You participated in many different events. And of course, England is the place responsible in so many ways for the creation of Palestine. So I guess it's a great place to be for some of the events you were involved in. So why don't you give our viewers an idea of the importance of this particular tour, what it was focused on, and how it relates to the current situation we've been seeing play out in Jenin?
Yes, thank you so much, Rania. Definitely, the Britain has been very much responsible for the colonialism of most of the world and the destruction of people around the world, in Palestine, in India, in the Turtle Island, which now is called the U.S., and the colonization and the slavery basically ripping off people. So this tour began with an invitation from my good friend, you may know her, Hassan Nasr al-Din, who's a Palestinian documentary filmmaker who's studying the early Palestinian women's history since British colonialism, actually documenting it and so on. And she is involved with a group of people in Nottingham University, as well as what they call Midlands for Cities. And they organized together a conference called "If I Dare to Be Powerful," which is a quote from the late may she rest in power, Audre Lorde, who is actually Caribbean. Some people say black, African American. She is African American if we think about the Americas, not just the U.S. as American. And she has been writing. I teach her work in every class I have. In every single class, I always start by assigning students a very short essay that's called "The Master's Tools Will Not Destroy the Master's House." And it's basically a study in questions of repression and resistance, hegemony, anti-colonial resistance, and so on and so forth. So that I was invited to be one of the keynotes of this conference, and it was very important for me because I also went to the same school as Audre Lorde. I went my undergrad alma mater, Hunter College, was the same as hers. I was also honored to be invited to be an instructor at Hunter College like her. I continue and maintain my undergraduate degrees less than my graduate at Yale University, because Hunter College is like has always been known as a school for the people, and now the main street is named after her, which is the crossing where you stop at the under subway station to go to Hunter College. So then there is a lot of other connections. For example, one of her books is called Zami, a different spelling of my name. I actually changed my name from Rabab Abdulhadi to Rabab Hadi during all my years of activism, because I didn't really want people. Didn't, as you know, I didn't want people to kind of like connect me specifically and say pin me and define me according to maybe the social structure of Palestine and so on.
Mhm.
Retained my name after I went to school, because also officially you have to, and I also that's for another discussion of the
Can
biography.
I just say
But
one thing
that
that's
was
so that's
yeah,
that's so
yeah.
funny about that? I actually my full last name is Abdul Khalek. So it's like I totally know where you're coming from with that. But go ahead,
So
please.
that was one of the issues. So anyway, I spoke about that. I connected what she did into to Palestine and to my project of teaching Palestine, and how do I understand the concept. One of the concepts we're doing in teaching Palestine, the living archives, because she was a living archive. She was, and her relationships were amazing, because she was building solidarities with so many communities. She discussed the question of difference, not erasing it, but to think about how do we negotiate towards justice. And this is one of the things that I advocate for, and I'm part of the movement for advocating for the indivisibility of justice. So that was like really amazing. And from that, several other invitations came up. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign in Sheffield, which is one of the longest activist chapters of Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And Sheffield itself is a city that has had probably maybe 30% of the population South Asian, Pakistanis. There are Yemenis there. There are people working. It's a formerly working class English city that has been completely destroyed by deindustrialization and neoliberalism. And so there is a lot of activists. There is a very active Palestinian group led by a man named Mushir Al Farra, who's from Gaza, who has been long time activist, and he and his known sister, Dr. Muna Al Farra, have written and spoken about losing 11 members of their family to the Israeli bombing in 2014, to the Israeli massacre. Very, very moving, very active, lovely man, amazing discussion with people. And I spoke on US empire, Islamophobia, and Palestine, and connecting them with each other. It was something to think about, how the histories of the US as a settler colony, Britain as probably the most advanced advocate of colonialism. I mean, Spain comes and competes with it as well. And then, of course, there is France, Belgium, and all the European powers, what they've done to, like, let's say, what we say the third world, Africa, Asia, and Latin America, including our own lands and countries. And then it was at the same time as British monarchy was celebrating, quote unquote, something called Windrush, 75th anniversary of Windrush. We're talking about the 75th anniversary of Nakba, of
Mm-hmm.
Palestinian Nakba, when Palestinians, and maybe for some of your viewers who do not know, when 3/4 of a million Palestinians were completely uprooted and displaced from their land in Palestine to 59 refugee camps around the region and in Arab countries in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, as well as in the West Bank and Gaza, the two parts that were not occupied in 1948 and were later occupied in 1967. And so this was so I talked about the connecting the things together, and this Windrush was very interesting because it also reminded me, and I do a lot of comparative history. It reminded me a lot of some of the stuff in U.S. history. So there is this the official story, the official narrative. Let's say the master hegemonic narrative says that Britain called on folks from the Caribbean, mostly from Jamaica and other British Caribbean places, to go to England to seek jobs. And they wanted to go and to seek jobs and so on. But then they don't speak about the ways in which England put back most of the people and deported them to Jamaica and the Caribbean under the pretext of quote unquote illnesses and disease, which of course, if we read Foucault and Madness and Civilization, we know this is a very strong reminder, but also reminder in U.S. history of when the U.S. Brought many Mexicans to Detroit to work in the auto factories, and then when the economy, when there was the recession in the United States, what they did is they called them repatriation of Mexicans to Mexico, but actually it was deportation. And when I was in Michigan, directing the Center for Arab American Studies, I used to work with a lot of comrades, colleagues in Mexico town, and Elena Herada and others who was actually some parts of members of their family were deported. Of course, there is an alternative discourse that's actually contesting from by Black and Africans in England and throughout the world, who are contesting this and saying, don't celebrate and just say that you've done us a great favor. And it always reminds me of the T-shirt that the students wear around. And I think one of my colleagues actually wrote about it in one of his papers, saying, "We are here because you were there. We are here in the heart
Mm-hmm.
of the empire, in the belly of the beast, because you were there." This is what happens with the question of immigration. So that was very, very, for me, it was actually um, a reason to start thinking about more about comparative studies. And then I went to Manchester Metropolitan University, and I was invited to give the annual Tom Herindale lecture, which was on the 20th anniversary of his assassination killing by an Israeli military man in 2003. He was killed he was shot on April 4th as part of the international solidarity movement in Palestine. Many people in the US, for example, know about Rachel Corey, and he belonged to the same movement. He was a young man photographer, went to the region, to Amman, to actually support people in Iraq against the sanctions, to take photographs and so on. And then he couldn't go to Iraq. He donated, I think, £500, the remaining money, and joined the International Solidarity Movement. And went and he was killed because he was acting as a human shield for children in Gaza. And so this was a lecture, and basically I argued in the lecture that Tom Herindale is a real Palestinian martyr. That martyrdom is not limited to people who are born as Palestinian. Palestine actually is known. Palestinian movement is known to have many people from all over the world who have come and fought with the Palestinian. And it's also not a new phenomenon for Palestine, because we think about Che Guevara in Cuba and
Mm-hmm.
Bolivia. We think about many people who went from many places to fight in the Spanish Civil War along the partisans against Franco's fascism. We think about people, Cubans going in Angola. I mean, we think about people joining the South African, the ANC, actually one of the main leaders, fighters of the ANC, who was based outside of the ANC. His nickname was Ya Habibi, And the reason they call him Ya Habibi, apparently because he was training with a lot of Palestinians and they kept calling him Ya Habibi, Ya Habibi. So this became his nom de guerre, which is it's something that people don't really know. And you see a little word, and then and the story was written by this anti-Zionist Jewish member of Umkhonto Assizwe, Spears of the Nation, which is the arm wing of the ANC, Jeff Klein, and in collaboration with Ronnie Kasriels, who's a very close comrade and a friend of ours. And then I ended in London with a talk, a meeting with the Palestinian youth movement on rising for Palestine in the diaspora, which was quite exciting. And so was meeting all these young people and seeing the potential for the future leadership of Palestine. I mean, thus defeating the Zionist narrative that the old will die and the young will forget. I mean, obviously, the young actually not only not forgetting, but digging through the collective memories and erasing colonial discourses. And then I was had a chance, honored to sit with Dr. Sui Ang, who has dedicated her life to Palestinian struggle, has was there in Sabra and Shatila during the massacre, worked in Gaza hospital, goes back again and again, and also continues participating. She's actually now well, and she's back training surgeons. She's a surgeon. She said, I need to go there 7 o'clock in the morning. I have to be training. And she is now very much involved in a new flotilla to Gaza called Hamdallah.
Wow.
She had just come back discussing the Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And then finally, I was really privileged to meet with a number of Iraqi and Palestinian feminists, activists, real scholars, and organic intellectuals such as Haifa Sangana, Jihan Al Hilu, Sana Mhedlis, many other people who came together to meet, and we discussed about the whole question of the what happened with the Iraqi sanctions, what happened with the U.S. invasion, how can we work with each other, how can we study and engage with each other. So it was, and I should say that my sister Reem, who lives in London, actually played also a big role. She and Mahasen and Mushir in organizing and working on this together. So I feel so privileged to have been able to speak and advocate and talk about what's going on in Palestine, connect the history, the past with the present, to inform the future, provide critical analysis, connect with different movements and people and so on, and just hear and meet amazing, amazing people throughout. I don't think we even have enough time to go through all the details, but it was just amazing, amazing. I really enjoyed it a lot.
And no, I mean that sounds incredible, and I think that this is just for those who are watching. This is like a small, tiny little piece, like a penny in the bucket of the amount of work that you've been involved with, not just on the issue of Palestine, but you referenced so many other connected issues. Not just talking about academia, also so much activism, and so it's a good segue into another thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is the attacks that you've had to face, which have been so unbelievably vicious and racist and misogynist and part of what you call this kind of new McCarthyism. So I wanna move to that for a moment. In 2007, and this isn't the only reason you've been under attack, but in 2007 you did create the Arab and Muslim Ethnicities and Diaspora Studies program at San Francisco State University. And that is something that ended up provoking so much attack from the Israel lobby over the years. And again, obviously, this is just one of many things that you've been involved with that have provoked the Israel lobby. But this in particular, I mean, it was just one attack after another, not just against you, but also your students by the Zionist lobby have been attacked. I mean, it's just
My
on and on and
colleagues,
on. Your
my colleagues,
colleagues,
my
anybody
colleagues,
who's,
the
yeah,
community.
exactly,
Yes, yeah.
everything. And I mean, what we've watched play out has been really just unprecedented attack on academic freedom when it comes to not just the issue of Palestine, but also this connects to the attacks on indigenous studies, on critical race theory, really just generally challenging colonialism and imperialism and Zionism, I mean, all of which are the same things. But one of the more recent well-known incidents that took place was, of course, what took place, I believe it was last year, when the pressure got so extreme. Zoom was actually lobbied and pressured successfully, so at the time, to censor a panel that you organized that included the Palestinian revolutionary Layla Khaled, who we've actually had on this program before. But I guess, my question to bringing all that up is to ask you, why do you think that your creation of this program at the university was seen as so threatening? And how is it connected to this sort of broader imperialist attack on anything in academia that challenges colonialism?
Yeah, thank you, Rania. This is a great question. We can go for a long, long time, but I will mention a few points,
Yeah.
and thinking that maybe we can expand on them today or maybe some other time. First, I really think that we kind of like, and you know this, but for your viewers and listeners, it's really important to remember that the United States has always been involved in crushing the narratives, in crushing the people, the indigenous people of the lands, kidnapping and enslaving African people, engaged in the Chinese Exclusion Act, in the Palmer raids, in the deportation of anarchists and communists in the 30s, in the Second World War, incarcerating and imprisoning in, they call them internment, but we really call them concentration camps of the Japanese, of 110,000 Japanese Americans and Japanese people from Latin America. And the act was called enemy alien. I mean, so we should really remember that. In the 50s, there was McCarthyism to kind of target anybody who has different opinions and than anybody else, and basically label them. And what McCarthyism did is isolate people and shut them down and deny them their careers. So people were deprived of their livelihood. People were told to inform on each other, so they become collaborators with the powers that be. People had to write, for example, under assumed names. Many writers have done so. There is a book by the former editor of The Nation, Navesky, which is called Naming Names. He actually talks about the folks who collaborated and the folks who resisted as well. And so there is collaboration and repression. And then in the 60s, we know that it is the couple of programs we know about. One is the Pentagon Papers, which was released by none other than Daniel Ellsberg. May he rest in power. He passed away last month, actually, and he was actually a strong, very good friend of Palestine. Many people do not even know about all these connections, and we had him speak at the Palestine Solidarity Committee events in the 80s. He revealed the Pentagon Papers, the U.S. intervention in Vietnam, and the lies that the Pentagon, the U.S. government, was telling. And then the other part of aspect was the COINTELPRO, counterintelligence program, which was a program that was revealed actually due to activists going to a warehouse in Pennsylvania, trying to find more evidence around Vietnam, and they stumbled upon this program by which the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover and Ron Cohen and the others in the FBI were had planned, and they were implementing, to assassinate and kill leaders of the Black Panther Party, of the Puerto Rican movement, the Chicano movement, of the American Indian movement. I mean, it's incredible what they have done to silence any people who challenge. So I think it's really important to think about this whole environment of repression and the ways in which this is a history. The history exists. The second aspect of it is that in the 60s, and I will start there, in the 60s, and which is why I ended up in San Francisco State, by the way. In the 60s, there were many movements that rose against the Vietnam War, that rose against US intervention, that could connected with the decolonial movements in the third world, connected with them, and I'm talking, and then including the very famous longest strike in the history of student movement, the San Francisco State Strike, led by the Black Student Union and the Third World Liberation Front, demanding a College of Third World Studies, demanding the decolonization of the curriculum, accountability of scholarship to the communities from whose lives we draw our knowledge, and breaking the boundaries between the university and the community. And for me, this was the place where this has started. So when I was invited to first give advice, and I did, I was directing the Center for Arab American Studies at the University of Michigan, Dearborn. I was very excited because I thought this would be really great. We'll have multiple centers for Arab studies, Arab Muslim studies, Palestine studies, and so on, and it might actually be able to decenter Americanness, because the Michigan was Arab American, so I really wanted Arab diasporas, Arab ethnicities to kind of like not look at boundaries and not respect colonial boundaries. And it was going to be, and they asked me, where do you want it to be? And I said, in the College of Ethnic Studies, of course, because that's where the college that led to the strike. So the problem with the 60s, what happened, the problem with the right wing, with the powers that be, with white supremacists, with racists, with Zionists, and they're all coming together, Islamophobes, Orientalists. It's very, very interesting how much alliances is, for example, you know that, and I know you spoke about it a lot. Richard Spencer, one of the organizers of Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, said, I'm a white Zionist to the
Yeah.
Israeli TV. I mean, this is Yair Netanyahu said that the worst thing actually to anybody is Antifa. They are as bad for Israel. They're worse for Israel than the neo Nazis. I mean, this is where these people come together. So the right wing actually had a problem because we had in the 60s, there was a counter movement to challenge the narrative, to reinstate the anti-colonial narrative, the narratives of the people, indigenous narratives. Come Reagan in 1980, there needed to be a reversal of that. So
Mhm.
you're seeing now a ways of trying to actually, there is the deindustrialization, there is the neoliberal rise, and so on. And there is the privatization of the academic institutions. So all of these things come together to try to stop all the stuff that has happened in the 60s that we were so inspired by. So my program is inspired by all of this stuff and tries to, and not tries to, does actually. Our program is called AMED, is called Justice Centered Knowledge Production Program. Its definition, which has been approved and passed in my university and the California State University, which is the parent, the 23 campuses, the largest public system in the United States, and I would say public in parentheses because there is more privatization going on, which is
Mhm.
also leading to these attacks. And we really are interested in kind of like thinking about, okay, so when we tell the stories of 68, the strike of the students, and so on, there were Palestinian students, there were Arab students. The organization of Arab students actually was very involved, very active in Berkeley, and this was one of the main organizations that's active in the US. Now, they're not written into the history of the strike. Why did that happen? How did that happen? So that was one of the things that was very interesting, and I felt necessary for me to do in this program. And also the minds of the people who were in the college at the time, and the students who were organizing, the historical General Union of Palestine students, Student Council for Intertribal Nation, Black Student Union, League of Filipino Students, Rarasa, all these student groups, they also were very much interested in making sure that we do not allow the histories to be hidden, to be
Mhm.
erased. I mean, so it was really about talking about challenging colonial narratives, challenging Eurocentric education, decolonizing the curriculum. And I went the same, so we were going to be the fifth department in the College of Ethnic Studies. On that basis, I left my job in Michigan and I went to San Francisco State. Lo and behold, the Zionists are not very happy with that, obviously. So one of the things that they try to do, were trying already to attack. They've targeted Palestinian students. They targeted Muslim students, students of color, indigenous students. There has been history at San Francisco State, which is supposed to be like one of the more progressive sites and so on. But the history of the university is not really honorable as far as our struggles are concerned. And it gets even worse when it comes to Palestine, because Palestine gets treated as an exceptional case. It's not exceptional by the Zionists, because the Zionist Israel presents Israel and the United States as exceptional miracles, right? So in
Mhm.
that sense, then we get put in a very different, let's say, corner to be attacked. And then when you think you can attack the Palestinians and pass what you want, you can attack everybody else. So you can actually scratch Black studies. You can use the tactics that you use to cancel Palestinian classes or AMED classes against Africana, against Black Center, against other students of color, against women and gender studies, and so on. Because once you have the laws, the bureaucracy on the books, you can implement it everywhere. And this is what I call creating facts on the ground. And this is
Mhm.
Israeli occupation and any repressive power does. So so then I'm also one of the outspoken Palestinians, and there is a whole bunch of us. I'm not the only one, but I think for us, what really makes maybe our case is a little bit more specific, not exceptional, but more specific, is that one is that I'm not, I refuse to shut up. Okay. I think directly to power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'll do
It's,
it.
it's really important to keep. I believe speaking truth to power is really, really important. And I believe this is our mission as educators. We are supposed to be teaching the truth. We are supposed to challenge dominant discourses and so on. Secondly, and I think this is really important, is that this San Francisco State historically has been known for the strike. So the university administration would like to retain the image of the strike, to put the flag, to raise money, to do all of
Mhm.
this stuff, but as long as it is window dressing. And
Yeah.
many of the strikers, many of the leading strikers, like the late Terry Collin, the late Margaret Leahy, the late Damira Ahmed, all of the strikers who led the strike in 1968 came to embrace us, and they kept saying that AMED is the program that realizes our vision. It has to be indigenous and Palestine. But for the Zionists, it is very serious problem to have this stuff legitimized in the curriculum. Because if it is legitimized in the curriculum, it is not only about shutting down a permit for a demonstration or canceling a speech by on CNN or what. And I'm not minimizing. I think they're really important. But when you're talking about making it part and parcel of the curriculum, and especially with our classes, they're all general education, which means students from all university can take, from business, from computer science, from engineering, from agriculture, from farming, from hospitality. They take the class. They say that you need to take some of the classes as electives. They come to take the class and they learn. And they learn about us and they learn about the world. They learn about comparative struggles as well. So it is very dangerous, all because it is to silence Palestine. It is very dangerous not to let people learn about Palestine. And it's very dangerous to make the connections, because also the interest of the white supremacists. I mean, let's think about DeSantis in Florida and the
Mm.
so-called against woke act and so on, to erase the history of the US, the terrible, horrible, violent history of the US, and actually erase it altogether. And so we do comparative studies as well. So on all these levels, AMED needed to be shut down. An
Mhm.
AMED program needed to be dismantled, even though I do have a clear contract with the university that I signed and the university has signed, on the basis of which I will create the program, I will have faculty members, we will have funding, we will grow it to a department. It's not just a program, a department. The more attacks, science attacks, and the more privatization the university went to, and the more right wing the leadership of the university became, to the point that most of the leaders of the university actually were trained in Zionism by the Anti-Defamation League, by the
Mhm.
Jewish Community Relations Council in collaboration with Hillel and other very well-known organizations that also have been called racist, Islamophobes, anti-Palestinian,
Mhm.
anti-Arab, not just by us. They've been called by many groups, including Jewish groups, including civil rights groups, and so on. So this is where it's coming to. They need to crush the program in order to prevent us from even realizing that what we have already achieved. So just like in the 80s, Reagan and company are trying to roll back the impact of the 60s. Now, what the university administration and its the Zionists that it's in complicity with, and the white supremacists, they're trying to basically crush the program and completely erase it from existence. Every single year, we feel and see more and more attempts canceling a class. During COVID, Palestine Center classes were canceled. And I said, you are creating facts on the ground. And they said there is a budget. And it turned out that there was a surplus of money.
Of
And the
course.
university president received 10% raise. So if there is no money and you're firing lecturers, why is that happening? So this is what's been going on. So we've been fighting it. And of course, it's not allowed. I would say the last point I'll comment on your question about the open classroom, that my colleague, Dr. Tomomi Kanakawa of Women and Gender Studies, and I co-organized, called Whose Narratives, Gender Justice and Resistance, a conversation with Leila Khaled. And we invited Ronnie Kasrils from South Africa, Laura Whitehorn, who's anti-Zionist, former political prisoner in the U.S., spent 14 years in prison, Seiko Odinga, who spent over 30 years in prison, leader of the Black Liberation Army, and Rula Abu Daho, the acting director of the Institute for Women's Studies at PRZ. And actually, we wanted to talk about the whole question of narratives and histories, because I had written about Layla. I had analyzed her story and so on and so forth. So we were actually bringing our students to learn about that. And it was impossible for the Zionists to allow somebody like Layla Khaled to come off and speak as a 70, at the time, 76-year-old grandmother who's actually speaking as a person. She's telling the story, she's arguing, she's debating because they needed to freeze her in everybody's memory as an evil person who's intent on killing. And even our university president wrote several statements, including, "I condemn the glorification
Ugh,
of the murder of civilians." And we and both Dr. Kinakawa and I said, "Well, why didn't you even ask us once to come and meet with you and say, what are you doing? Why are you doing this class?" But we do know now that the Zionist movement, 19,000 messages were sent from an app called
wow.
Act IL
Yeah.
to social media. We know that the Lawfare Project, which spearheaded this campaign against us, actually contacted the U.S. government. Remember, Trump was in power, so they sent to the Department of Education Betty DeVos, big right winger. Her brother is one black water.
Eric Prince. Great Eric Prince, head of Blackwater.
Exact,
Yeah.
exactly. And then to the Attorney General, to Homeland Security, a congressman from Colorado, actually right wing, demanded that we be investigated. We were accused of engaging in material support for terrorism, and our own provost, academic provost, sent us an email saying that some people tell us that you might be involved in things that are violating of the law. You might face imprisonment or fines. You need to find your own lawyers. So we wrote back to her and we said, where are the lawyers of the university who are supposed to be protecting us? And she said, no, it's you're on your own. And why are you threatening us with imprisonment? And our argument was that, so we actually kept trying to hold the class, but we kept getting shut down, just as if we
Wow.
were like running from one checkpoint to the other, like a patient, an injured person. You're trying to get them to the hospital in one, and then there is one Israeli checkpoint after the other. And one of the arguments I kept asking the university and the AT, okay, so Zoom is shutting us. You're supposed to provide us with another venue. It's a classroom. We're
Yes.
teaching a classroom. If a pipe breaks in the classroom, if a or gas leak or electricity goes off, you are supposed to provide us with another venue. We're not the ones who are supposed to. It's not up to the instructors to actually provide another venue. Our job is to teach. This breaks, it's your job. There is a very clear division of labor in the university.
Hmm.
You did not provide us with that. So what we ended up doing is that Dr. Kinakawa and I filed grievances against the university administration, and we won for violation of our academic freedom. We won the grievances, both of them very, very clearly, and the grievances were heard by a faculty hearing panel and randomly selected group of faculty whom we did not know. We don't. They get chosen by lottery between the university and the union, and they heard and they ordered the university to apologize to us for everything they caused us. They actually named the university collaboration with the Lawfare Project, the Zionist group. They named it in their own ruling, and
Mm.
they ordered the university to set up the classrooms and make them happen, whether they make them happen however they want to make them happen on Zoom or whatever. It's not the job of the university to do so. Unfortunately, the university president came up with this. First of all, she vetoed the grievances, which is total violation of faculty governance and total disregard of the claims that you know how our countries are always called anti-democratic, right? But the
Yeah.
university president felt that she has the right to impose a draconian decision, violate and veto and disregard the labor, not only our own labor of doing so and our union, but also these three panels that came together and passed the resolution. And in one of the she wrote several statements. One of them was published in the J Weekly, which is run by the Jewish Community Relations Council, a big Zionist group that's targeting us, that has been targeting us from day one, right? From 2006, 2007, I think. And said that in one of her statements, she said that Zionism, Zoom is free to have its own terms of service. And we said, what do you mean? Don't you have a contract with Zoom? Zoom serves over 400,000 contract with the California State University. If you have a service and Zoom is supposed to be providing you with the venues to hold classes, you can hold Zoom accountable. Why are you letting them off the hook? But this also points to not only to the university president's anti-Palestinian, Islamophobic, Orientalist, and racist, outright racist um, uh, attitudes that are being reflected in her actions, but it also points to the collaboration between the university and private big tech companies that
Right.
are basically also ruining, I mean, San Francisco and the Bay Area and so on. This is where it is at, and this is where the Zionist power is also being implemented.
I mean, it's really stunning what took place because they blatantly censored this panel. I mean, it's not like Layla Khaled was even in the country. It was a virtual panel. And this is a historical figure. People can think what they want about her. But I think at the end of the day, what this comes down to is this need, as you were explaining before, to make sure as few people as possible, whether it's in academia or outside of it, are exposed to the narratives from our part of the world. Because if they were exposed to those narratives, it would be a no brainer. One side is the oppressed and one side's the oppressor. It's actually not that difficult. So if you're the side doing all the oppressing, you, of course, need to make sure nobody hears from the other side. And I'm so happy that ultimately you all were victorious in the long run. Of course, the victory there did not get the attention as much attention as the initial act of censorship. And you've repeatedly been victorious over and over against these people. But I mean, at the end of the day, part of all of these attacks isn't just to isn't just because the pro-Israel lobby, the anti-Palestinian fanatics, the imperialists, isn't just because they're constantly desperate to shut you and others down. It's also like to make an example and to wear you down. So other people look around and see, wow, you actually have a lot to risk and lose if you speak out on these issues or if you participate in this part of academia. So maybe it's just better not to. Um,
Yes, you're totally, you're absolutely right in that, in the sense. I mean, it is to make an example and
yeah.
to tell other people that you don't really want to go through the toll.
Hmm.
That people like me, like others of my colleagues, I mean, there is. If we start with the list, we will not stop. How many people have been targeted? How many people lost their jobs? How many people were censored? But we also need to also think about the invisible censorship or the self-censorship that it's imposed upon people, or people impose upon themselves because their livelihoods are at stake.
If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear the rest, you can access it by becoming a Breakthrough News member at patreon.com/breakthrough news.